Welcome to Paranormal M, where each story promises to be a journey into the unknown. Subscribe and activate notifications to stay updated with our latest spine-tingling tales. Enjoy the thrill of the paranormal. The Lady in Room 424. This happened last December. I, a female 21, am a medical student. But since I was traveling in January, I decided to work as a caregiver in a nursing home for old, dependent people. When I first arrived, there was this woman that was dying. She was very old and in pretty bad shape. That was really tough for me, since I've never seen somebody die, or even dead. Anyway, I was working for a few days, and I came back one afternoon. My coworkers told me that the lady died the day before. Usually when somebody passes in a nursing home, the caregivers do the mortuary toilet. Edit. Translated too literally. Sorry, I actually meant preparing the body. But this woman had a contract with the funeral. They were doing it. But for some reason they couldn't take her already. So they put her on a cold bed in her room until they could come back. The blinds were closed, the lights off. Obviously the door locked. Only people working here had a key to unlock every door. 5 days after passing away, she was still here. It was a morning, and there were 3 caregivers in our building. We'll call them Claire and Anna. It was 8 a.m. and I was with Claire, who was giving food aid to another lady. The phone rang. We had one phone where we received an alarm bell with a resident asking for help by pulling on that string for, at the hospital. I saw the room 424, and I said I'll go for it. I was new, so I couldn't remember who it was in that room, but as I was walking the hallway getting closer to the room, I remembered, and I froze. I ran down the stairs looking for Claire and asked if she knew anybody coming down in the dead lady's room, thinking that this might be her family or the funeral people. She frowned and said that she didn't think so. This was getting a bit confusing. I looked for Anna, asking her the same. She told me that she had no idea. The phone kept ringing, and Anna kept going to tell me, check if anybody's inside the room, and maybe this could be her family asking for something. So I went back. The door was unlocked and the light was on. I knocked on the door. "Hello?" I said. No one answered. I didn't have the guts to go inside, but I could see the lady was still there. I truly was shaking. I pressed the little button to close her door and deactivate the alarm. I ran back again to my coworkers, explaining to them what the fuck was going on. I said I deactivated the button. Then the phone rang again. Claire told me to stay here and give the food aid while both of them were going to see what was going on. When they came back, they told me the most chilling thing. Nobody else was inside that room. The body was untouched. They called many people working here. Nobody was supposed to come. But mostly the reason why the phone kept ringing was that the alarm button, which was under her bed, was ripped from the wall. And for those asking about the smell of the body, saying that you can't leave a body more than a few hours, actually you can, and there'll be no smell. Funeral workers come and put the deceased people on a cold bed. Don't know if these work precisely or how, but the body's kept very cold. That also allows the family to come by and to see them. And I get that this is weird for you, but this isn't really unusual in France. I've worked in a different nursing home and bodies would be left in a cold bed in the room for 1 to 2 days. 5 to 6 days is very extreme, however. In a way, I think it's a little bit disrespectful for the lady and the family. It's too long of a wait. Also, about that button in the alarm. In the room, there's a big red button attached to the wall by a string. It's close to the bed. That's what residents press if they need any sort of help, like in a hospital. And then at the entrance of every room, there's a little button to show your presence. It's a small green button that you use when you're in a resident's room. There would be like a green light over the door outside if the family or the doctor wanted to come into the room. That way they would wait. Also, it deactivated the alarm of the same room. Like you push once, there's a green light, you push again, and then there'll be no light above in the room. Why I believe in the paranormal. I was about 9 years old. My dad, me, and my siblings went on a vacation to my grandparents' house that's so far away from home. And to visualize the setting, my grandparents' house was half renovated with the living room and upstairs room. It was a deteriorating ancestral house, but the kitchen and bathroom and upstairs were used as a boarding house with few rooms. The backyard was still the original house, not renovated at that time. Everything was still in construction, so the TV was in the kitchen because the living room was a mess. It was midnight. We're watching a TV show with two of my cousins and my sister and my aunt. We'd laugh so loud at the shows and during the, advertisements, cracking jokes. After a while, suddenly there was a very loud noise from upstairs. It sounded like kids running around. Thought it was my aunt's, children playing, but we didn't even, have time to react or shout at them because this loud noise came downstairs. I think the best way to describe it, it was like a brown-colored wind or smoke speeding. There were these stomping sounds down the wooden stairs. It passed by the TV and into the sink where the glasses in the rack rattled. We were still frozen in shock and fear and confusion. The wind came back from the sink and past the TV again and up again the stairs with the stomping feet noise sounded like it was in a hurry. The frames were hanging on the walls of the stairs and they were shaking. One of them even fell. I couldn't believe at the moment in my life that I just witnessed something that I can't explain. I've told this story to a lot of people. Some didn't believe me, some did. My aunt, who's always cooked in that kitchen, said that she used to do that paranormal thing as well. I used to hear it and see it, as well as my cousins and my dad who grew up in that house. They seemed to brush it off that day. But in my mind as a child at the time, I was horrified. That experience is something that'll haunt me forever, even now in my adulthood. Fairly certain my brother's house is haunted by an increasingly violent, confrontational poltergeist. Just want to preface this with the fact that I've never experienced anything paranormal before this year, beyond observable, questionable light orbs in my own iPhone videos taken on touristy ghost tours. I've always been skeptical about claims of the supernatural, and now I wish I could go back to being blissfully unaware. I say that because I'm pretty much convinced my brother's house is haunted by something or someone who seems to hate his guts. I think it wants him to leave. Without divulging too much personal details, I'll just say that my brother's an automotive technician who lives in Virginia. He's the kind of dude who listens to metal, drinks whiskey daily, has tattoos, and wears tactical boots. He goes off-roading, goes to shooting ranges, and has a girlfriend from New Jersey who helps him with anything technically savvy, given how he's largely computer illiterate. During my entire life, he's always jovially insulted me with mocking nerdy nicknames like Urkel Durkel. He was always quick to get into fights and arguments too. That was until the last few months after moving to his new place, a seemingly quiet suburban home built in 1977. Now he seems far more soft-spoken and respectful, fearful and filled with anxiety, sleep-deprived, and kindly asks to stay at my place or to have me sleep over at his whenever his girlfriend's out of town or working or visiting family in Jersey. It's a weird change in his behavior, and it's everything to do with what we believe is a poltergeist tormenting him. And by we, I mean multiple other witnesses, including his girlfriends, friends, coworkers, and house guests. He dreads going back to his own home at night to sleep, despite once being proud and elated about finally having his own basement man cave and is currently relieved to be on vacation. It started with him coming home from work and finding the overhead fan in the garage turned on nearly every day of the week. He thought this was just his girlfriend turning it on and messing with him. She denied it, thought he was doing it to mess with her. The fans and lights seemed to just be going on by themselves after coming back to the house. It's an ongoing problem. Then one night when I was smoking a cigarette in the garage, I heard the door leading into the basement open. Turned around, nobody was there, I assumed it was his girlfriend. That was only at first. Well, she was snug under a bunch of blankets on the couch watching TV. That was far from the door. She thought it was me coming back inside. A few weeks later, both my brother and I are smoking a cigarette in the garage. Both witnessed the doorknob turn with a distinct sound. The door pushed itself open with considerable force. Despite it being an old door, it gets jammed in the frame. There was no HVAC or air conditioning on, but then again, air pressure doesn't really turn a doorknob. We both reacted in real time. We were saying, "What the fuck?" to each other. We talked about it all night. We then learned his girlfriend had seen the handles of a plastic bin seemingly opening by themselves. One of her friends also expressed fear of going into the garage because he had said he felt someone standing behind him breathing. He did this as he went to grab a couple of beers from the fridge in the garage. And from there, things just escalated quickly. My brother was putting away a liquor bottle in his liquor cabinet in the kitchen. He noticed a knife on the counter jump up 2 inches in front of him. He did an experiment, slamming the same cabinet door, but the knife or other objects didn't move from the vibration. On a different day, he heard a canister of garlic salt fall over inside one cabinet, and 5 minutes later, a box of pasta from a totally not adjacent pantry falls over as well. Then when he had one of his mechanic buddies over to the house, they both simultaneously heard a loud, prolonged scream. It was a feminine voice coming from upstairs. It seemed to be coming from the hallway. That was while they entered the basement through the garage. Both looked at each other saying, "What the fuck was that?" Basically. So when my brother was later explaining this to his girlfriend, her computer crashed in the nearby study and was on the floor instead of on her desk. So my brother talked to an HOA guy in the neighborhood. They told my brother that a few decades ago a pastor used to live in the house. A holier-than-thou type. They despised drinking, smoking, and loud music. And 3 things my brother enjoys on a daily basis. He said the pastor had not been dragged out of the house when dying, or rather, had to be dragged out of the house when dying. Being overly attached to the property, apparently, and later died in the hospital. The next-door neighbor confessing that, well, she died when she was young, or he died when she was young. She also confirmed that the previous owner, a family with a little kid, quickly moved back to their home state of Texas. They became freaked out by noises and a sense of dread in the basement, along with the faint smell of cigarettes in the ground floor hallway leading to the house's 2 bedrooms, despite noting their family smoking cigarettes. The neighbor also refused to ever step foot in my brother's house. Searched online, found no records of anybody dying in the home, but that would exclude a person like a pastor dying at the local hospital. Just last Sunday, my brother then drunkenly started cursing at the ghost out loud. He was insulting him for being an uptight and righteous pussy pastor. It was while we were sat on the basement couch watching TV. We both heard a rumble upstairs and didn't know what it was until we later went upstairs and found that the attic door was open. It was shoved to the side. It was revealing an eerie dark chasm in the middle of the hallway into the dark attic above. You might think that's unremarkable, but the attic door is thick and heavy. It's inset into the ceiling by about 3 full inches. It requires some muscle to lift up and over. It's about 10 feet above the hallway floor, requiring a stepladder for any person of normal height to reach it. I left in the middle of the night after he passed out, for obvious reasons I didn't want to say, but I hung out with my brother the very next night at my place instead. That's because he refused to go back to his own home after waking up in the morning, messing with the thermostat in the same hallway right before going to work and hearing a female voice moaning so loud it rattled his bed. He continued to sleep at the house the following night, Tuesday, but on Wednesday went to a local bar and restaurant with a friend before going back to the house. Sure enough, the lights on were in the house despite him turning all of them off. And that was days earlier. His girlfriend was, present out of town on vacation. She was in Florida with friends, so waiting for him to come down there when work permitted. I helped him pack for his trip to the airport the next day, and sure enough, in the middle of the night after he passed out, I faintly heard a female moaning. It was coming from upstairs. That's while I was sleeping on the basement couch. And sorry to dump all of this on you guys, just have to vent because this is extremely bizarre. I don't know where else to really unload all this shit. And if you made it this far, thanks for reading. It's a cool house, he loves what he's done to the basement, and they've sunk some money into the place, decorated, and I've helped mount a big flat-screen TV in the family room wall with a swivel. They're properly moved into the home, you could say. I'm afraid they won't live there for a year, given the escalation. My brother jokes around that he's got 2 roommates who don't pay rent, the pastor and the moaning lady. But he's visibly shaken by this. His mental health is not okay. I fear this will soon become a financial burden for them if they have to move again. One of our friends is currently trying to convince him to set up cameras or audio recorders in the house, if only to prove to people he's not losing his mind. Good thing he has 2 other witnesses. Dad, who I didn't know, died. Maybe left me a parting gift. I'm not sure if this belongs, but give it a read and let me know what you think or if you've had any similar experience. My dad died this previous week. He was very sick. I didn't know him very well. We were getting back in touch, but I hadn't heard from him in a while. He died very suddenly. His funeral was yesterday, and after an emotional day, the family was eating. I remember picking my teeth, wishing I'd dental floss numerous times. I didn't ever pick my teeth when I got home. Whatever it was stopped bothering me, and I was so exhausted I just went to sleep. I woke up this morning, made my bed, and brushed my teeth. Keep dental floss picks in a bag by my sink, untouched by cats. But still didn't floss, and then I showered. Left my room, came back, and there was this dental floss pick on my bed. Thought it could have been my cat getting one from behind the trash because they're crazy. Must be real. I haven't flossed in a while, and the floss was completely unused. It was placed on my bed in a way like somebody put it there for me to find, not thrown carelessly. And this just happened. Just walked into my room and stared at it, inspected it, threw it away because I felt crazy for even thinking about his spirit doing that. And I sat down and cried. It was just such a weird thing. I don't know how it got there. I'm really struggling to believe that my cats did it. Is it possible that this was a ghost or spirit, like a parting encounter, or was it a gift? It's a strange gift. Dad's funeral was last night, and after the service meal, I needed dental floss the next morning under mysterious circumstances. There's an unused dental floss pick on my bed, and then I cry. I'd like to share this response to a post somebody made here. I responded with this a few days ago to a person asking about experiences with a long-fingered image that they've seen. I'd really like to know or talk to any others that have experienced anything similar. The original response is below. I know it's hard to talk about, but if anybody wants to share, I'm all ears. Or ears in this case, I guess, since I'm reading, or eyes. 40s here. Sane, married, job, house, car, sober. Just for context. Joined this sub a couple of months back, but this message stood out to me, so I thought I'd share it. I called it the bumblebee hands as a kid. Came in the form of night terrors. A faceless head at the end of a long hallway. Figure outside my bedroom window looking up at me. Hands that would pop up over the side of the bed, then retract. Figure walking away from the bedroom to bedroom or hallway. Always with those hands. I've always just said that I was like an over-imaginative kid. I always was allowed to watch any horror movie, and my family were kinda not really the greatest. I was the kid that would jump from his bed to the hallway because I was sure those hands were just wanting to grab my feet if I didn't. I also had to have the bedroom door open a bit. I still get night terrors from time to time as an adult, but you sort of come out of it and just go on with life. I've learned how to kind of shut these dreams down. The trick is to sort of fuck back with what's messing with you in the dream. It doesn't always work, but it's never really, well, never anything like when I was little. But here's the scariest thing that's ever happened to me. I was 8 when I really swear I felt those fingers touching my head one night. Just one slow, gentle swoop across from my head from the headboard area of the bed. I've never forgotten it. I was awake, I'd pissed myself. I'd lied there in my own piss for a long time, afraid to move. Heart racing, sweating. Finally bolted out of the room screeching, and of course woke everybody up and got yelled at. Got punished for pissing in my bed. Slept with the lamp on for years after that. Kid's imagination, most likely. An actual physical encounter I don't disbelieve, but as an adult I don't share the story with people in my life. I don't just say that you're crazy or laugh, and I'm not really thinking it's that funny myself. I just know at the time it felt real and I was awake and never ever want to feel that again. I think something is outside of my home. It started when I went to go put laundry in the wash one day. We have a laundry room attached to our building, and it was broad daylight, so I wasn't exactly feeling nervous about anything. I got about 20 feet from the walkway and alleyway to the washroom. I smelt the worst rotting animal smell I've ever smelled in my life. Not only that, as soon as I smelled it, I got the strongest fight-or-flight reaction I've ever felt. Ran back to my unit, locked the door, and had a small anxiety attack. Waited about 15, maybe 20 minutes before going back out. When I did, there was no smell. I felt normal. Fast forward about a week later. My husband and I are outside about 1 a.m. maybe, smoking a cigarette. That's when we heard what sounded like a dying dog. We live right off a major interstate, so we assumed an animal must have been hit. We started walking towards the direction of this noise, sort of wheezing, like a wheezing whine, a terribly sad noise. We got to the edge of our parking lot. We got to the pavement, the wheezing dog noise turned into what sounded like an owl hooting. And I understand owls make strange noises. I was raised in Texas. I've heard many. But this was not an owl. The longer we listened to it, the more it sounded like a person trying to mimic an owl. My husband called out, "Hey, is somebody there?" pretty loudly. Just silence. We stood quiet a few moments before the owl noise completely stopped, the sound of an unnatural laugh echoing from the trees. The only way I can describe this noise is like when a deaf person laughs. Like they can't hear how they sound, so it kind of sounds off a bit. I don't mean to sound rude, truly. That's just the only way I know to describe it. It felt like ice water was in my veins as soon as I heard it. Both of us just felt an extreme fear in that moment and ran back to the house. I could explain off all these things if I hadn't seen what I'd seen next. A few days later, I'm outside smoking. It's 7 p.m. and I saw 2 men walking on the same side of the street where I'd heard the noise a few nights prior. They walked past the trees a little ways, but then stopped. It was dusk, so light was low, and one of them turned on their phone light and shined it into the trees before jumping back. Both men took off at full sprint away from the tree line. I have no idea what they saw, and I didn't hear anything, but there was pure fear there. The most frustrating part was I was looking right at them and saw absolutely nothing. Fast forwarding about a week later. I get a text while I'm at work from my husband telling me that he heard our daughter talking and laughing in the field across the street. He was 100% sure that it was her. That was until he realized she was inside her room. He said it sounded just like her. Fast forward again a few days later. Found dried blood on my door jamb, as well as scratches near the doorknob and more dried blood at the bottom of my door. My neighbor had their internet cables cut and told me that somebody had tried to open their door the night it happened, then slammed their body against the door trying to break in. My neighbor said he forced himself out of the door, ready to confront whoever was there, but there was no one. We constantly hear things on the roof, things in the alley behind our place. Our dog will run to the door at random hours and sniff and growl like someone's there. I probably made a mistake by calling out to this thing, whistling at night, trying to antagonize it. I desperately want a recording. I have one recording of its noises, and it sounded like an owl, but towards the end there's this low, inexplicable moan that comes from the same place the owl sounds are coming from. It's hard to hear, and it ends very abruptly. I don't feel like this is good enough. No one believes me. Something's out there. I know it. I feel it watching me. If I curse it or try to lure it out, it goes completely silent or it does that horrible laugh. I can never seem to catch the laugh or any of the noises. As soon as I hit record, it usually stops. I don't know how to explain this, but I know I'm not crazy. So please, if somebody can help me, I really want to know what this thing is. Pictures of the blood in the door and the scratches and the video of the owl and the sounds in the moan. I just feel like no one will take this seriously. It always smells like a corpse when it's around, and it's the sort of biggest sign something isn't right. I brought it up to one of my native coworkers and said that, leave it be. Wash the blood from your door and stop trying to talk to it. He wouldn't tell me anything else. I don't know if this is a Wendigo, a skinwalker, or something else entirely, but I've never felt such dread and fear as I do when I hear or smell it out there. Please, someone, anyone, if you know what this is, please tell me. Tell me I'm not losing my mind, and if it's real, how do I make it go away? Noises behind closed locker doors, and an encounter. This is something I experienced back in 2019 while studying in secondary level. Before I start, my school is really old, and it should be considered as a historic site. During the Japanese invasion, bodies were buried beneath our school floors. Already chills are sent down my spine writing this. It was around 1 p.m. after lunch break. I wanted to collect my books from my locker, which are situated at the highest floor of our school. Before entering, you'll see the statue of Mary glaring at you. It's scrutinizing your every move. It was already frightening to see her haunting face, but the location itself was already isolating. When you reach one side of the hallway, it's filled with lockers. The other is a storeroom. In front of you is a science lab. Anyways, I went to the further end of the hallway to collect my books. As I was walking, I felt dread weighing over my shoulders. I felt that something was amiss. I ignored my instincts, which later is going to cost me. I sat on the floor, just taking my sweet time removing books from the locker. I heard footsteps. They were made from a heel within the science lab. The sound was extremely loud as the floors were made of wood. I paused, really tried to focus on the sudden noise. It grew louder with each passing minute before it just coming to a halt. I peered into the classrooms in the lab, but nobody was there. The sky grew gloomy. I stood there waiting for somebody to appear, but after minutes of waiting, there was no sign of teachers. In fear, I paced toward the exit. After a few steps, I heard voices of children laughing and running around right behind me. This was odd since children shouldn't even be here as a secondary school. The noise wasn't even from outside since it was a Monday and there weren't any physical activities on the field of the day, or the first day, rather. I sped up my walk and suddenly all the lockers in unison were making loud, brash noises from inside, like the inside. I jumped 10 steps, almost broke an ankle, and ran back to my classroom, cried in front of everyone. Everybody thought I was hysterical. And I never went back up again. Told my classmates to bring my books from upstairs. In my final year, no joke, my locker was situated on the lowest level as well, a different building. I'm lucky. The creepy case of the Barari deaths. After being a farmer family living in a desert, the Chundawat decided it was time for a change, moved to northern Delhi. That was 1989 after selling all their farmlands. Initially, it was just Bhopal, his wife, the youngest son. They moved out, but over the following 2 decades, the rest of the family moved along with him. By 2007, 12 Chandawats were living in the same house in Delhi. The family's main source of income came from their grocery and plywood shop, which they had set up on the first floor of their house. In fact, the family made good profits from the shop. And this was not just because of the quality of their goods, but also because of their warm personality. Bopal had a really friendly personality. The neighborhood saw him as a father figure and his wife, Narayani, as a mother figure. Thus, they called them Daddy and Mommy. Narayani was a really caring woman. They had a habit of giving food and drinks to the workers on the streets, and also took care of the kids of the locality. Other Chundawat, who were Bopal's 3 children, their 2 wives and his 5 grandchildren, were always present in the store. They were also well respected. Bopal met his demise in 2007. The family suddenly lost their patriarch, but despite such a big loss, the family handled the situation quite well. Following Bopal's death, the family started to improve in every aspect. They also started spending longer hours at the store, which led them to set up another store with their profits. Also, the family members' health significantly improved and completely gave up on alcohol and tobacco. Even the kids of the family changed and they started doing better in school. Although the neighbors noticed this sudden improvement in the family, they were only happy about it and didn't question anything. But as things unfolded, they would understand the creepiness that was causing these changes. The Chundawats, who always opened their store at 6 in the morning, didn't open until the 1st of July in 2018, and they were not responding to their neighbors' calls. Eventually, a 70-year-old neighbor walked to their house to check on the family, make sure they were all right. He didn't get a response, despite knocking on their door multiple times. As he kept knocking, he accidentally twisted the doorknob, and to his surprise, the door opened. As he entered the house yelling out the names of the family members, he saw something so terrifying that he literally fainted. He ran out of the house screaming in fear. The police were eventually informed. The police officer who initially checked the house at first wasn't able to stay in for more than 10 seconds. Just like that 7-year-old neighbor ran out of it before, eventually going back with the other officials. During their investigation, the police found 11 hidden diaries that gave full insight into the road to this dreadful site. Road to Tragedy. Shortly after Bopal's death, the Chundawats called a priest to help them with a prayer that honored their lost patriarch. During the prayer, Bopal's youngest son, named Lalit, started chanting, captured the attention of the other family members. A few years back, Lalit met with an accident that took away his ability to speak. Thus, the family were completely shocked hearing him speak out of the blue, and his chants continued. They heard his voice slowly transform into Bopal's voice. After this incident, Lalit kept his newly found voice. Although the initial days after this event were completely normal, things started to quickly change from the 7th of September of 2007. From this day onwards, Lalit started laying out rules for the family, and the number of these rules kept increasing. These rules ranged from what, when, and how they ate to what and how they sold things in their shop. The intensity of the rules kept increasing every day, and at one point, felt as if the family were going through punishment. Lalit told the family that Bopal was possessing him every night, and he used his body to write down these rules to help them save their souls. In line with these rules, the family had to reach the house before 9 p.m. At 9 p.m., Lalit would be possessed by Bopal and lead a prayer which lasted for almost 30 minutes. And with time, the family completely accepted Lalit as Bopal, and everybody except Bopal's wife addressed him as Daddy. With the weirdness continuing, Bopal's grandchildren grew up, and on the June of 17th, or the 17th of June as we say, they organized a grand engagement party. A couple of weeks later, they invited one of their neighbors for dinner, and this neighbor noted that everything was completely normal, and everything the family talked to him about the wedding, which was a few months away, pretty normal too. 2 days after this dinner, the family didn't open their shop, which led to the 70-year-old neighbor finding them dead in their house. The Terrible Discovery. 10 members of the Chundawat family were found hanging dead in the front hallway. They were hanging in a circular pattern while being very close to each other. All their hands and feet were tied together. Their eyes were blindfolded with strips of cloth. Their mouths were taped and their ears were sealed with cotton balls. Underneath their hanging bodies were toppled over black stools. The remaining member of the family, which was Bopal's wife, was lying dead in her bed with the belt next to her. The police initially thought they were murdered, but upon reading the diaries, they understood that what happened was far more sinister. Lilith, who was apparently possessed by Bopal, told his family members that in order to truly save their souls, they had to do a ritual, which he called Bad Tapasya. And in this ritual, the family members had to hang like the root of a banyan tree. The family practiced performing this ritual for 8 days, and during these practice sessions, they learned to tie up their hands and legs and put their heads through a noose, tighten the knot, blindfold themselves, and seal with their ears with their tied hands. On the day of the ritual, the family sacrificed burnt offerings and proceeded to do the Bad Tapasya. Lilith and his wife helped the other family members. They helped to get themselves into the hanging position. And since Narani was not able to get into this position, they took her into the bedroom and strangled her to death with the belt that was lying near her. Once she showed no more movement, they undid the belt, went back to the hall to complete the ritual. They walked around the room, toppling the stools on which the family members were standing and thus hanging them to death. Once they made sure everybody was dead, Lilith and his wife tied their limbs, put their head through the noose, taped their mouths, blindfolded themselves, sealed their ears, and toppled the stools. The stools that they were standing on. Aftermath. The family strongly believed that upon the completion of this ritual, Bopal would walk right into the room and save them from dying. To prove it, they believed that Bopal would change the color of the water that was left in a cup near their bodies. They had even left the front door unlocked to make it easier for Bopal to come in and save them. The family were extremely confident that they would not die from the ritual, but things would turn out to be completely different. According to many psychologists, the suicides were because of a shared psychotic disorder, but Lilith's elder brother, who stayed in Rajasthan, claims that it was a planned murder. So was it a suicide driven by delusion or a well-planned murder, or the work of something paranormal that pretended to be Bopal? I leave it to your judgment. The mysterious case of the SS Aurang Medan. Eerie distress signals. In 1947, multiple Dutch, American, and English ships picked up a disturbing Morse code distress signal from a random area of the Indian Ocean. The distress signal said that an officer, including a captain, are dead, lying in chart room and bridge. Possibly whole crew is dead. This message was followed by meaningless Morse code, after which it said, "I die." After conveying this message, the signal ended. After hearing the signal, the ships that heard it were able to determine the exact location from where it was sent. It was determined that the ship that sent it was a Dutch freighter ship. It was named the SS Aurang Medan, and the signal seemed to be coming from the end of the Strait of Malacca. As this location was close to an American merchant ship named the Silver Star, they tried sending return signals to the Aurang Medan, but despite trying multiple times, it never got any reply. Thus, the captain of the Silver Star decided to reroute, sailed towards the Aurang Medan. Boarding the Aurang Medan. A couple of hours later, the sailors of the Silver Star discovered the Aurang Medan at a distance. The ship appeared to be completely down. It was drifting through the water with its flow. This sight, combined with the distress signal that they'd received earlier, made them anxious about the state of the Aurang Medan's crew. As they went closer and closer to the ship, the crew noticed that the ship appeared completely deserted. There was no one on board. All the lights of the ship were off. They started blowing their whistles, sending Morse code signals to the ship to get the attention of its members. They didn't get any response. With the obscurity surrounding the Aurang Medan growing, the captain of the Silver Star decided to board the ship. After boarding the ship, the crew members of the Silver Star found multiple crew members of the Orang Medan lying dead on the deck. All of their corpses were lying on their back with hands stretched in front of them. It appeared as if they were defending themselves from an assault. All of their dead faces depicted extreme fear. Also, their dog appeared to have died while growling at something. Corpses, corpses, and even more. That's right, corpses. The crew members of the Silver Star were caught entirely off guard by what they had just seen, but they kept walking to the ship. As they made their way to the bridge, they found multiple other crew members of this, well, they were all in the same position. The only corpse that was in a different position was the body of the person who sent the distress signal. He apparently died while still sending the signal, as his finger was still on the telegraph. After completely checking the ship and discovering multiple other corpses, the crew members of the Silver Star descended into the bowels of the ship. They were greeted by strangeness. With no ventilation in the boiler room above it, the bowel is always very hot, but the bowel of the Orang Medan was uncharacteristically cold. In fact, the crew members of the Silver Star said they felt as if it was around 4 degrees Celsius. Despite so many dead crew members, the Orang Medan only had its engine turned off. It didn't have any notable damage. Also, the dead members didn't have any external injuries. All of them were rapidly decomposing. This was particularly strange as the crew had sent distress signals just a few hours before getting discovered. The explosion of the Orang Medan. Not knowing what caused their death, the captain of the Silver Star ordered his crew members to not touch any of those bodies. He decided to tow the ship to the mainland, seek the help of experts to understand what truly happened to its members. Thus, they tied a tow line to the Orang Medan and started sailing toward the mainland. Then, a few moments after moving the Orang Medan, the crew members of the Silver Star started seeing smoke coming from its insides. The smoke exponentially increased with time. They decided to cut off the tow line. Moments after cutting off the tow line, the Orang Medan completely exploded. It exploded with so much force that it was literally lifted out of the water fully, quickly sank into the depths of the ocean. The explosion of the Orang Medan left behind no proof of its strangeness. The captain of the Silver Star and his crew members headed to mainland in search of answers to the thing they witnessed inside the sunken ship. They weren't able to find any. The only proof of this incident is the testimonies of the crew members of the Silver Star and the other ships that received the disturbing distress signals of the Orang Medan. Had a paranormal encounter, and I'm a pretty scientific and skeptical guy, so this was huge. We were going on a hike. There's this spooky abandoned train tunnel in my state where a bunch of people died. It was like 100 years ago. So now it's haunted, allegedly. Brought one friend of mine with me on the hike since it was a long one. The area and scenery were beautiful, but the tunnel itself was something else. My buddy, let's call him Ed, he was a bit more nervous than me. Didn't want to go too far in. Wanted to go as far as I could, which turned out to be not that far, because the tunnel was blocked by implausible debris. But wait, there's a small hole on the side of the debris mound. Turns out I could crawl through it, so I asked, "Hey Ed, you feel like crawling?" "Nah, dude, no thanks." So I took off my pack and coat and squirmed on through. On the other side was the rest of the tunnel, but with water that went up to the nearly top of the mound on the other side, as far as the eye can see. Dang. I'd have to swim in icy cold and nasty water for who knows how long to keep exploring. Nah. So I decided to crawl back. My buddy Ed was nervous, but we weren't done yet. Next, we busted out one tool for detecting ghosts, an EMF reader. Somebody who was pretty scientific, I tested it multiple times and made sure that it was working before bringing it. We decided to try and contact ghosts in the tunnel. I was pretty confident nothing would happen. We turned off all the electronics and lights, so it was pitch black. Just the EMF reader was on. I asked pretty basic questions to the ghost. I asked it to come in front of my scanner, so I'd know it was there. We did this for a while. No reading, nada. No surprise. So we headed back. Decided to keep my EMF reader on. And then as we were walking back, suddenly it goes to 2 lights. Thought maybe our flashlights were causing it, so we then turned them off. Nope, still 2 lights. Reset the device, 2 solid lights. Think something's here, dude. Adrenaline started flowing into my body now, yet I was still skeptical. I started asking questions again. Then my EMF signal got even stronger. We were both getting chills and the hair on our skin were standing. Around this time we heard something kind of like a distant cough, but it was so fast it was easy to dismiss. I reset the device again. Still getting a strong signal from something. It's not coming from us. I then said, "Is it alright if we just stay in the tunnel with you a bit longer?" The meter instantly went back to 0. Surprised but confident now, I asked, "Do you want us to leave?" Then it instantly went back up to high. Okay, I was pretty convinced at this point. Headed for the entrance to the tunnel and discussed our experience. When we were at the entrance, we noticed that the EMF was picking up another signal. It was just above and to the side of us now. But if you sort of pointed it in a different direction, there was nothing. We left after that. We think the ghost may have been hanging out by the entrance, waiting for us to leave. You could always say that the EMF was faulty, picking up something else, but I'm sure that the device was working. Tested it so many times before and after, and there was nothing on us producing EMF. And considering that we didn't get any readings in there for the vast majority of the time that we were there, truly mind-boggling. Still processing it. Casper the Backpack Ghost. I've always been lonely, and maintaining relationships felt like a chore, trying to force a smile and pantomime along with the usual script. So one day I decided I'd make my own friend, Casper. I always envied little kids who have their imaginary friends. Decided to get my own from my mid-teens. I didn't make up a lot about Casper. I always imagined a lonely boy, quiet and good-natured, there to listen, invisible to the world. It was absurd and humiliating that I made up an imaginary friend, so I'd mostly joke around about him when I was doing that with others. When I was alone, I dropped to my knees and poured out my heart to an empty room, telling him my problems, my hopes and dreams, how much I hated myself. This summer, I was headed down deep south, lower border of Mississippi and Louisiana. I was going down there for a change of scenery, give myself a mental health vacation. Things were bad when I got down there. Never stayed at one house for more than a day, and I had learned to keep everything I needed in my backpack. I was tossed around from house to house. My backpack and I stayed together as I was sort of ping-ponged around. One weekend, I stayed at my cousin's house. We were only 2 days apparently in age and shared many of the same interests. We spent the night running around with fake katanas and watching anime. My cousin has a terrible fear of the concept of other entities. So as we laid in bed together getting ready to turn off the light, I told her that there's nothing to worry about. My best friend Casper was here. He might seem a little creepy, but he's fiercely loyal to those he loves, protects us from any harm. Pointed right next to the bed and smiled, saying, "Good night, Casper." I turned off the light, and that was it. The next day we got up early. We were going to meet up with my cousin's coworker to go to a haunted historical site, Myrtle Mansion in Louisiana. We were all packed and ready to leave. I took one long look at my backpack and decided to leave it behind. It had everything I owned in it and I loved in it. But it would just be unnecessary weight. So I dropped it in my cousin's bed right on the foot of the bed. Both of us remember me putting it there. We head out meeting our group at the restaurant they worked at a few miles to town. We all headed to the back, started to sort of hop into their truck. Sitting in the back, I feel something at my feet. I look down to see a backpack, but it looked just like mine. I slowly reach down and unzip it. It was my backpack. I'd never been in this truck in my life. It didn't even know my name, much less what I was saying. My cousin and I both confirmed that I'd left my backpack in the house in her bedroom. Yet somehow, a 20-pound backpack magically appeared. I was shook. My imaginary world had just bled into the real world. I stared at that backpack for the whole 2-hour car ride. When we arrived, I questioned everybody and they knew nothing. Not even that I even had a bag in the first place. I look at my cousin and then look around me as the tourists bustled around us. Then I got a text from an old friend who I hadn't talked to, who was a Wicca. Randomly out of the blue at that exact moment, they texted me asking how I was doing. I looked up and out loud thanked Casper before going to the restaurant and enjoyed my day. I was hugging my backpack. I played with the Ouija board as a kid, but terrorized by something for months. I'm looking for some answers to what happened to me when I was 12. I'm 23 now, and these events still loom over me. So at the time, I was living in Virginia with my parents and 2 step-siblings. We'd recently moved into a newly built townhouse development. Our townhouse had 3 floors in total. The upstairs area is where the bedrooms were located. The living room and kitchen were on the main floor. The basement was my sister's bedroom. And at the time, I was becoming increasingly interested in the paranormal. I would wind up watching all sorts of ghost shows on television, and eventually I learned what a Ouija board was, and I wanted one. But I knew I wouldn't by any means, be able to buy a real one myself. I knew my parents wouldn't approve. So I opted to make my own. I created a template on a piece of cardboard, carefully replicating what a real one would look like. And for the planchette, I used a plastic square-shaped lid that was the perfect size. I heard that it wasn't safe to use it by myself. I didn't have any friends in the area at the time, so I asked my sister if she would try it with me. She was reluctant at first, but after some convincing, she was game. Her uncle had recently passed a few months prior, so we decided to try to contact him. We set the board up in the basement, her bedroom, like a picture of her uncle next to us. We both lightly put our fingers on the makeshift planchette, and I began to ask questions like, "Uncle, are you here with us tonight?" And to both of our surprise, it didn't take long to get a response. The planchette moved to yes with force. At first, I assumed my sister was messing with me. But soon I would be proved wrong, because she started crying very hard. After a few more questions with responses, my sister informed me that she wanted to stop. I don't remember what else we asked because it was so long ago, but I don't remember that planchette would move with haste every question. We ended by informing her uncle, in quotes, that we were leaving, moving the piece to goodbye. Afterwards, it took some time for my sister to calm down, and I was pretty blown away myself. Strange things started happening to me almost immediately after. After we had finished using the board, we both went upstairs to calm down and watch TV. 30 minutes later, I heard a bang come from the basement. I went downstairs to investigate. I found that the planchette had moved from goodbye to no, and the picture on the wall had fallen down. Well, this disturbed me. So afterwards, I opted to tear up the board and throw it away. After I did this, I assumed that was the end of it. And for my sister, it was. But I didn't know that this was, going to be the beginning of months of pure terror for me. I don't know why, but whatever this thing was attached to me, my sister didn't have any odd occurrences afterwards. Meanwhile, I started noticing strange things happening. It started small at first. I noticed our family dog would all of a sudden refuse to come into my bedroom. I'd pick him up and take him into my room anyways. When he was in there, he would act very strange. His ears would stick straight up and his eyes would fixate on certain corners of my room. He would whine and bark, and occasionally his head would dart around like he was watching something move around. Then I was sitting in my room another one, watching TV, laughing at a show I was watching, and my school binders were sitting all the way at the foot of my bed. I was sitting at the head of the bed a good distance away. One of my binders slid all the way across my bed, hitting me in the arm. This freaked me out, and I informed my parents. They told me I was just imagining things. Weird things like this kept happening to me. One time I walked into the kitchen during the day by myself. A sponge that was sitting on the dining room table just suddenly flew across the room with force. I continued to experience things like this, and they started becoming more frequent. I talked to my sisters about it, and she told me that nothing odd was happening for her. I was a mess at the time, and I did not want to go home. I'd often try to go to a friend's house after school instead, which most of the time didn't work out. Talked to my parents again, and go figure, they thought I was making it up for attention again. After a little bit of going through it, I had the most terrifying night of my life. This event still sends shivers down my spine when I think of it. It traumatized me. Although I've worked past it for the most part, I still try not to think about it. I've only told a few people in my life about this because it sounds like a straight-up lie. And this night was the climax of my experiences. After this happened, the activity completely stopped. One night I was laying in my bed. It was 2 or 3 in the morning. I couldn't sleep, so I was just laying there. My whole family was asleep and the house was completely dark. I slept with my door open at the time, and the only light source was a blue light emanating from my radio in my room. It was just bright enough to illuminate my room itself. I had my blanket over my head covering half my face. I could still see my room from waist height down to the floor. To my horror, as I laid there with my eyes open, a black figure entered my field of vision near the foot of my bed. It was next to my bed. There was no color on it, and whatever this was, it was a pure pitch black with no obvious features. I was paralyzed with fear. Couldn't scream or move. I just laid there as I watched this thing slowly move down my bed until it stopped right in front of my face. I then felt a hand placed on my head to the blanket that was over me. The hand rested there for a second, then began moving in a circular motion for a few seconds. Eventually, the hand lifted as I watched the dark figure just slowly move away and then out of the room. This was the last thing that ever happened. After that, it just completely stopped as fast as it started. This whole ordeal has left a huge impact on my life. It's the first time I'm sharing this story online. I haven't tried until now because I didn't want to type it out and relive it. I'm more curious as to what the fuck happened to me and what that thing was. I think that I should also add that aside from anxiety and depression issues, I'm mentally sound. I've never experienced hallucinations or delusions. And I know that, what happened to me was real. Gettysburg Ghost. Genuine sighting. This really happened. Take my word for it. And if you wish, you don't have to. That's fine too. As far back as I can remember, I've always enjoyed learning about history, including military history. As an early teen, my dad got a copy of Time Life's The Civil War Gettysburg. I looked through it and read it constantly. I was particularly drawn to a photo of a deceased soldier. It was at Devil's Den. Never forgot it. Fast forward about 20 years. My wife and I decide to finally visit Gettysburg on Halloween for our wedding anniversary. My first stop had to be Devil's Den. Gettysburg Military Park had tons of one-way little roads, and the road towards Devil's Den had a few. We missed a turn or something, we got lost. It was approaching evening, but not dark yet. It was overcast with a little drizzle. My wife and I were hungry. Decided to come back tomorrow. Driving back into town, I pulled up to a deserted road that was only about a 4-way stop. This is where we saw it. Sitting at the stop sign, I automatically looked to make sure that it was clear to drive off. As I was about to pull away, I saw something to my left that was probably close enough to reach out and touch. There, floating midair about torso height, was what looked like a cotton button shirt that I believe was dark gray. It was torn to pieces and fluttering violently as the hurricane winds were blowing. I don't remember sounds or smells. There was no blood, and I don't recall seeing any body parts, just this shirt. My brain didn't or couldn't register what I was seeing. I looked at this apparition for about 10 seconds, then drove off. A moment after that, I turned to my wife without saying a word. She was smiling at me and asked, "Did you see it?" Every word of this is true, and every event happened. There's no mistaking what my wife and I saw. No mistaking it for anything other than what it was. Someone joins me every night in bed. I live alone. Every night when I would settle in for bed, almost without fail, it feels like someone else comes in and lays down next to me. First, it feels like a cat jumps like they do when they want to join and cuddle a pile, but thing is, I don't own a cat. A short while later, I'll feel the bed shift like it would when, like a significant other comes to bed themselves. This is long before I fall asleep or even get close to it. I usually watch an episode or two of something, let it settle my mind before sleeping. This usually happens in the first few minutes once I'm settled in. There's no strange feelings or cold chills, nor the pressure in the chest that comes with sleep paralysis. I'm trying to remain a skeptic about this, but I swear I can feel the bed shifting with the weight of somebody who isn't there. Once I swear I got bopped on the face by something. I've tried Google, but online were more people just asking about this. So I know I'm not the only one, at least. Is there a name for this phenomenon? Is it like a normal part of sleep? It's far from disruptive in my life, but it's piqued my interest in a very Fox Mulder sort of way. It might also be worth noting that I work the night shift, so I end up sleeping most often during the day. It doesn't matter what hour I go to lay down to sleep. It always happens. No matter what hour you guys are going to sleep. Sweet dreams.